Some believe that it's a little too difficult for the Bucs to bring back Chris Godwin. That and more on today's episode of Locked On Bucs.
You are Locked On Buccaneers, your daily Tampa Bay Buccaneers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, and welcome into this episode of Locked On Bucs, your daily podcast covering the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I want to thank you for making Locked On Bucs your first listener view every day. Don't forget you can subscribe or follow for free on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. And of course, you can follow along on Twitter. I am James Yarcho at JYarcho_Bucs, credentialed member of the media covering your Tampa Bay Buccaneers, here with you every Monday through Friday along with the everydayers. And for that, I want to share my appreciation for your continued support of the show. One of the ways you can support the show is become a Locked On Bucs insider. You're going to get news, rumors, updates, general thoughts, one-on-one conversations with me via text message. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes to become an insider today. An insider mailbag question about free agency, and Yaya Diaby is not too happy. That's all coming up in a little bit, but we're going to start this off with some recent comments about pending Bucs free agent that you all want back. I want him back. The Bucs want him back, but it seems as though some don't believe that Chris Godwin will in fact be back. So Spotrac, a site that I reference often on this show, they had an article from writer Michael Giannitti where he spoke about Chris Godwin and Giannitti. I apologize to Michael if I'm mispronouncing his last name, but he said, quote, Godwin was on pace for another Godwin-like campaign in 2024 before an ankle injury derailed his season. Teams will have some pause when assessing the 28-year-old coming back from his second major injury, but a weak wide receiver market will help sustain his ability to cash in. The former third-round pick carries a 3-year, $66 million valuation in our system, end quote. Okay. Here's the thing. This article, this comment seems to have people getting a little bit riled up about the money that it's going to cost to bring back Chris Godwin, and I'm not sure why. We knew he wasn't going to be cheap. Like, we knew this was going to be difficult to navigate. There was going to be a lot of money that went his way, even though the injury happened and it probably limited what he could max out in as a free agent. But all of a sudden, 3 years for $66 million seems to be shocking people. So let's talk about this all for a minute. I understand that this is his second major injury, but there's a big difference between the first one and this one. I've talked about it on the show before, but the first injury, we're talking severe major ligament damage. That is much more difficult to fix and recover from. There was no ligament damage here. This was a dislocation and a broken bone. That's very, very different. This isn't going to be like the ACL tear where it takes him a year to get back and another year to return to his regular form. So yes, while this was a major injury, it isn't nearly the recovery process that an ACL tear is. Trust me, my son is not a world-class athlete like Chris Godwin is, and I'm watching him go through an ACL surgery recovery. It's difficult. It's hard. You lose all your muscle mass in that leg. It's tough to come back from. But remember, Godwin himself said that if everything with this recovery went right, there was an outside chance that he could have been playing in the NFC Championship or the Super Bowl. So these are very, very different injuries. Second, we're going to continue to beat this drum because I wouldn't come on this show and talk to you all about trading for players or signing players if the Bucs weren't able to make it happen. They can free up more than enough money to sign Chris Godwin and still get plenty of other players in free agency or via trade. Just for fun, as an exercise, I went to Over the Cap. They have a lot of really fun tools over there that you can use, but I started messing with their cap calculator. I extended or restructured the contracts of Mike Evans, Tristan Wirfs, Baker Mayfield, and Luke Gedeke. I cut Jordan Whitehead and Jamel Dean, and I wound up with nearly $40 million in cap space with just those moves. I signed Godwin for the $22 million a year that Janetti talked about on his Spotrac article. I re-signed Lavonte David to a 1-year deal. I re-signed Ben Bredeson to a 3-year deal. I signed Mike Edwards for a year, and I still ended up with nearly $18 million left in cap space to continue to play with. That was simply from cutting 2 guys and either restructuring or extending 4 more. This is not a crazy out of left field premise. I got it done with ease, and believe me, I am not a threat to Mike Greenberg in the Bucs front office. He is a billion times better at this than I will ever be, and he does it in real life rather than playing on a calculator and messing with numbers on the over-the-cap website. Now, it's a fun tool to use. It's not a 100% science. Contracts are a lot more complicated than they make it out to be on that website, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what you can do. And I did very little to free up almost $40 million for the Bucs to be able to play with. So this is not an issue. We see it done every single year. The Saints have turned it into a science. They've been doing it for 2 decades. And the Bucs have been one of, if not the best at it over the last 5 years when they started loading things up for Tom Brady when he came to town in 2020. So do not worry about the cap situation. Do not concern yourself with the fact that the Bucs only have $2.2 million in space right now. They could sit down at lunch on a Tuesday and have $35 million in cap space freed up before they leave the office to go to dinner. They're going to do it. They know they have to do it, and it's going to allow them to not only bring back Chris Godwin, not only bring back Ben Bredeson, not only bring back Lavonte David, but to go out and sign free agents or potentially make splash trades for that elite edge rusher that we have been talking about them needing. I'm going to talk more about edge rushers coming up in a little bit. That's also going to be a running theme of this show throughout the course of the next couple of weeks. So, despite the concern that I have seen from some in regards to Godwin's estimated value, this is a move that Light and Greenberg could pull off before they've even had their morning coffee to get out of their days from just waking up. I talked about it on the Squad show with David Harrison and Peter Bukowski and Kevin Ostreicher and the rest of the guys there, Cody Rourke. Godwin's not going anywhere. I'm 97.5% sure that Chris Godwin is going to be a Buccaneer next year. And Evan and I have talked about it numerous times on the show as well. It's cheaper for the Bucs to re-sign him than let him walk because of all the dead cap. They can manipulate the dead cap that they would incur from him leaving into a new contract and not have it hit as hard. So there is more than just his play and his leadership that causes the Bucs to want to bring him back. It's also a smart business decision from a financial standpoint and a salary cap standpoint to make sure that he is back in red and pewter next season. So I don't know why people are worried about this. I don't know why they're freaking out about it. There's, of course, going to be a little worry of what if Chris wants to test the market and a team like the Packers offer him 4 years, $100 million. If a team like the Broncos with Bo Nix, Sean Payton has seen firsthand what Chris Godwin can do. They could go out and offer him 5 years, $120 million. Sure, that is a concern, but I think the Bucs get him locked up before it even gets to the open negotiating window because they want to get it done. They want to make sure that he's back It helps their financial situation, but more importantly, it helps Baker. It helps this offense. And imagine how much better they would have been down the stretch this past season and in the playoffs if they had Godwin compared to what they were without him. Insider Mike wants to know about free agency. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As a small business owner, your work doesn't end when the clock hits 5. Your business is always on your mind, which means when it's time to hire, you need a partner that works just as hard as you do. That's where LinkedIn Jobs comes in. When you clock out, LinkedIn clocks in. LinkedIn makes it easy to post your job for free, share it with your network, and get qualified candidates all in one place. Post your job. LinkedIn's new feature can help you write job descriptions and then quickly get your job in front of the right people with deep candidate insights. And here's a pro tip. If you add the hashtag hiring frame to your profile picture, you can double your reach to qualified candidates. It's no wonder that 72% of small businesses say that LinkedIn helps them find high quality hires. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedonnfl. That's linkedin.com/lockedonnfl to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thank you again for making Locked On Bucs your first listen review every day. The new Locked On NFL is here, and it's 2 shows every day. You got the Madman Tyler Rowland kicking off your morning. Then you can stop by the barbershop with Tony Wiggins for some real NFL talk. You add in the Locked On local experts. You get unprecedented NFL insight, hot opinions, detailed breakdowns, all in 30 minutes. It's the new Locked On NFL, and it's twice a day. So make it your second listen at the new Locked On NFL on YouTube or wherever you get your podcasts. Insider Mike texted in, and he asked about the Bucs and free agency, saying, who is the best free agent that we should be looking at? Someone who comes in and starts day one. It can be any position. And if you have a choice, is there one position or player that you would downright stay clear of? Mike, this is a great question, but it's also a tough question because while there are a lot of really good free agents this year, I'm not sure that there's one that I'm really going to be pounding the table for and hoping the Bucs go all in on. I would say the closest is Josh Sweat, depending on if the Bucs try to trade for one of the more elite edge rushers. You know, you can go back to the show that I did with Evan a couple of days ago. I talked to him about Josh Sweat. He gave his thoughts. But look, Sweat isn't going to give you the production of Hendrickson or Garrett, but he is going to upgrade the position. He also isn't going to cost you what Hendrickson or Garrett will, but that's because he isn't as consistent or dominant as those guys. Both Hendrickson and Garrett have double-digit sacks in at least 4 of the last 5 seasons. For Garrett, it's been 7 straight with double-digit sacks. Sweat has double-digit sacks in just 1 season in his career. Now, that's not to say that he wouldn't be productive or he wouldn't be good with the Bucs should they sign him. I would be really, really excited if the Bucs sign Josh Sweat. But I don't think that he moves the needle for the defense the way the other guys will. If the Bucs make a trade for either of those Ohio guys, Hendrickson or Garrett, they are immediately being talked about in that Super Bowl contender conversation in the NFC. They are immediately in the same conversation as the Philadelphia Eagles and the Detroit Lions. Sweat, he's a nice addition, but is he a championship addition? I'm not so sure, at least not in a vacuum, not by himself. If the Bucs sign Sweat, you're not all of a sudden saying the Bucs are right there with the Eagles and the Lions. They trade for Garrett, they trade for Hendrickson. That is going to be the talk of NFL Network. It's going to be the talk of sports radio. It's going to be the talk of this show in this network. So outside of that, one guy that I think really helps out the Bucs pass defense and elevates the back end of that defense is Justin Simmons. If the Bucs move on from Jordan Whitehead, which seems to be a topic that's gaining a little steam, Simmons on the back end with Antoine Winfield Jr. would be an incredible combination. He's versatile, he's a ball hawk, and putting him in a Todd Bowles defense would be so much fun to watch. Again, this is not a long-term solution. He is entering his age 32 season, and he's coming off of a little bit of a down year with the Falcons, but this is a player that has 32 career interceptions. He led the NFL in interceptions just 2 years ago. 2 interceptions, 7 passes defense, 62 tackles, 2 tackles for loss last year with Atlanta. But in Tampa, in this scheme alongside Antoine, he could return more to that Denver form that we saw that made him a perennial Pro Bowler, got him all pro nods, was the reason that Atlanta wanted to go out and get him. He brings a level of leadership and understanding to what we all expect to be a very young secondary. I mean, think about it for a minute. If the Bucs move on from Jamel Dean, the oldest player in that secondary is going to be Antoine Winfield Jr. He's entering his age 27 season. Other than that, you got McCollum, you got Isian, you got Tyreek Funderburk, you got Tyke Smith. You have a lot of really young guys with really high upside. Having those 2 veteran leaders on the back end at safety could do wonders for this defense. The Bucs brought in Jordan Whitehead to be kind of that ball hawk guy, that complimentary safety to Antoine. And they owe him $4.5 million this upcoming season if he plays. But they also have an out built into the contract where they can cut him. They can save that $4.5 million against the cap and have no dead money whatsoever. Simmons' estimated market value this season, according to Spotrac, just over $5.5 million. So you would be paying him just a little over $1 million more than you would have paid Jordan Whitehead. Then you still have Isian, you have Rashad Wisdom, you're probably still going to draft a safety. You can bring back Mike Edwards at probably $1.5 million for some depth, for a rotational guy, for a situation where you can have Whitehead I'm sorry, not Whitehead. You can have Simmons and Winfield and Edwards all on the field together. That's a strong safety group. That's a really strong safety group. I would love that. And look, I like Jordan Whitehead. And I think had it not been for everyone and their brother getting hurt in the secondary, he's probably coming off of a much better year than what he had. But he certainly didn't have the impact that the Bucs thought he was going to, or that I thought he was going to, or other members of the media, other people that cover the Bucs. He just didn't have the impact that we all thought he was going to. Then he turns around and he does something really stupid at the end of the year, keeping him out of a must-win regular season game and then keeping him out of the playoffs. The Bucs may see an opportunity here to move on. And if I'm the Bucs, I am strongly considering going after Justin Simmons. This secondary needs all the help that it can get. And if you bring in a safety with over 30 career interceptions to come in and line up next to Antoine, you do it. Especially when the cost difference is essentially negligible compared to what you were paying or what you would be paying Jordan Whitehead. And what's crazy is that Simmons led the NFL with 6 interceptions in 2022, and he only played in 12 games. He played in 15 games in 2023. He played in 16 games in 2024. So he's missed 8 games over the last 3 seasons, but he played in every game for 4 straight seasons before that. Whitehead missed 5 games for the Bucs last season, then missed a playoff game. So as much as it pains me to say it, because I do like Jordan Whitehead so much, but cutting him and bringing in Justin Simmons, that's an upgrade. And the Bucs can afford to move on from Jordan Whitehead if they're going to go get a guy like Justin Simmons. May only be a 1-year deal, may only be a 2-year deal. But if I'm looking to the free agent class to get a starting safety while still likely drafting one to develop and build up your depth and build up the future of that position group, I'm going real hard at Justin Simmons to make sure that I'm getting him in the building and that I'm not letting him leave until he signs on the dotted line. He's seen it all. He's done almost all that you can, and he's familiar with the division after spending last season in Atlanta. This is a move that I would really, really want to see the Bucs make. Then real quick, as far as a position group and free agency that I'm avoiding, it's probably the defensive tackle group. And there's some great talent that is going to hit the open market with defensive tackles. BJ Hill, DJ Jones, Javon Kinlaw, Greg Gaines is going to end up hitting free agency. Sebastian Joseph is going to become available. And while the Bucs have a big need along the defensive line, whether that's to slide Logan Hall into the rotational Greg Gaines role, or in that way you upgrade the starting line, or you just let Hall stay where he is and you bring in another rotational guy. This draft is overflowing with defensive linemen. You could get one on day 3. You could get one in the 5th round. If you're looking for a Greg Gaines or William Golston replacement, you're going to be able to get one in the 5th round that can come in and take snaps for you as a rookie. So do not spend the free agent prices on one of those guys. Draft one, draft 2. Now, they could wait until the second wave of free agency and get a guy, on the cheap, but there are better places to spend the big money in free agency than defensive tackle. With as deep as this draft class is, put your focus on addressing that position in April. Sign other positions when free agency opens up on March 12th. We are going to talk a little bit about Yaya Diaby being slightly unhappy. That is coming up next on today's episode of Locked On Bucs. When the game tips off, the NBA action is just getting started, and there's no better place to get in on it than with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. With FanDuel, you can place live bets throughout the game, so even if you miss the opening tip-off or want to bet on a fourth quarter comeback, you can stay in the action. And if you're looking for a bigger payout, you can even combine your live bets into a same-game parlay. I love using FanDuel's live betting feature because it keeps every moment of the game exciting. Whether I'm backing my team for a late game rally or picking up a player to hit a clutch 3, I never feel like I've missed my chance. Plus, the app is super easy to use, and when you win, you get paid instantly. The Boston Celtics are the favorites to win the NBA Finals at plus 195, followed by the Oklahoma City Thunder at plus 230, and then the Cleveland Cavaliers at plus 850. Right now, new FanDuel customers can get $150 in bonus bets if your first $5 bet wins. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. That's FanDuel.com for your shot at $150 in bonus bets. Make every moment more with FanDuel, the official sports betting partner of the NBA. Wrapping things up here on today's episode of Locked On Bucs, and Yaya Diaby isn't exactly thrilled with the fact that people are saying that he isn't an elite pass rusher. I said that he's not elite. He's probably a little mad at me, but he took to Twitter to post a picture of him hitting Saints quarterback Spencer Rattler. Solid picture choice, I'm not going to lie. But it had the caption that said, "I can't wait to prove all the doubters wrong. Trust and believe I am an elite pass rusher. FYI, watch Phil." Okay, I get the frustration from Diaby here. He had a lot of hype leading into the season, and I was guilty of it. I was pumping those tires like crazy leading up to the season. But Bucs fans were certainly disappointed that Yaya finished with just 4.5 sacks. This dude was touted as a double-digit sack guy coming into the 2024 season, and he finished with 3 fewer than he did in his rookie campaign. Now, you can certainly say that Diaby's stats did not match the production. PFF has him as their 15th ranked edge rusher last year based on pass rush grade. That's ahead of Khalil Mack. That's ahead of Chop Robinson. It's ahead of Will Anderson Jr., Zadarius Smith. I mean, PFF had Yaya winning 18% of his pass rush snaps. That's 17th best in the league. Basically, when it comes to analytic metrics, Diaby ranks in the top 20 across the board in just about every category. And a lot of times he ends up in the top 15. But does that make him elite? I'm going to say no. Elite, when we're talking, that word gets thrown around a lot. But when you're talking about elite players, we're talking top 5, maybe top 10. It puts him in the category of really good. I have no problem saying Yaya Diaby's really good, but he's not elite, at least not yet. The top 5 to 10 guys, we're talking Myles Garrett, Aiden Hutchinson, Micah Parsons, Trey Hendrickson, TJ Watt. Those are guys who are showing up in all of these metrics, all of these categories. They are consistently in the top 5. Maybe one of them's dropping out of the top 5 and they're 6 or 7, and somebody else jumps up for one particular category. But more often than not, those guys are the ones that are in the top 5. Diaby is about 2 tiers behind those guys. And that's not a slight to Yaya Diaby. That's perfectly fine. It's the reality of the situation. Those are the guys that are winning 20+% of their snaps. They're getting double-digit sacks. They're getting 50+ hurries. They're getting 20+ quarterback hits. Yaya's close. He's winning 18% of his snaps. But Hutch won 38.3%, which is insane. Myles Garrett, he won 23%. Micah Parsons, 20%. Hendrickson, 20%. So Diaby's close, man. He is. But when you take a look at those guys winning their pass rush win rate, the other big difference between them and where Yaya is finishing. When those guys are winning their reps, they're finishing plays. Whether it's forcing an incompletion or an interception with their pressure or getting the sack, they're finishing the plays. Diaby tends to be about a half step too slow from getting to that level. And I say all of that to say this. I love this fire from Yaya Diaby. I love it. And I hope he's watching this show, and I hope he's pissed off at me for saying all of this. That means that he cares. That means that he's going to continue to work on and master his craft until people like me have to eat our words and say, I was wrong. He is elite. That he is in the conversation with Hutch and Trey and Myles and Micah and Watt. And look, Hutch was in a completely different universe last year before his injury. He had 8 sacks in 5 games and was winning more than a third of all his reps, nearly 40%. That's Defensive Player of the Year, record-setting sack pace for the season. I'm not sure Hutch gets, that level of production sustained all year long next year. But Diaby is on the cusp of breaking into that realm. I say he's about 2 tiers behind those guys because I look at the second tier as being those guys that are just ahead of him right now. Von Miller, Brian Burns, Jared Verse, Nick Bosa. But he is so close to that top tier of edge rusher, and a lot of people don't realize it. When you look at the analytics, when you look at some of these metrics that isn't just stat scouting, when you watch the video, he's so close. And maybe trading for Trey or Myles or signing Sweat is what finally unleashes his full potential. When he's not the only edge guy on the roster that opposing offenses have to game plan around and have to focus on. And he's not the only edge guy on the roster that can generate pressure and getting held every other snap like he was in a lot of games last season. Every Batman needs a Robin. Every Jedi needs a Padawan. We might see the full potential of Yaya Diaby unlocked in 2025 if the Bucs make the right move or moves to bring in some pass rush help. Braswell, he's got to take a step up. He's got to elevate his play. But Diaby wasn't getting any help from JTS. We can certainly revisit this conversation after next season to see if Yaya has taken that step forward and he's moved up from tier 3 to tier 2 or taken that giant leap from tier 3 to tier 1. But the man can't do it alone. I get the frustration that he has from being doubted by media, by critics, by fans. But he also has to understand that they say the things that they're saying, because elite edge rushers do not wind up with all these high marks in analytical portions of the game and still come away with just 4.5 sacks. It's all about finishing. And if he can speed up that half step that he seemed to be behind last year, he's going to be a real dangerous player in the NFL. But he needs some help. That's going to do it for this episode. Coming up tomorrow, super excited to have my guy Rock Riley joining the show. Cannot wait to sit down and talk with Rock. You're not going to want to miss that. In the meantime, check out everything going on over on Twitter at Locked On Bucs, at @JYarcho_Bucs. Become a Locked On Bucs insider. Go to joinsubtext.com/LockedOnBucs or click the link in the show notes. And of course, make sure that you are following along on YouTube with those notifications turned on, as well as wherever you get your podcasts. Hope you all have an absolutely outstanding day. Stay safe, stay healthy, fire the cannons. Want to thank you so much for joining me right here on Locked On Bucs, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.